Good morning. This is a day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and sing his praises. And today we will sing his praises. We have Bill here to lead our singing, and Andy. Andy brought his keyboard. And we have our songbooks. I understand that Nancy is home and doing well. Well, first of all, welcome to the Asbury Sunday School class. Here we are. We're in our beautiful outdoor chapel with lots of smiling faces, and it's so good to see everybody. Nancy is home and doing well, and we assume that Bob and Esther made it up to Pennsylvania, and Susan, our other educator, is traveling this weekend too. So we have an honored guest from the Heritage class to teach our lesson today. Richard Langston has agreed to do our lesson for us today. Yay, Richard, thank you. And let's start off singing our hearts out.
Welcome to Saturday school. We passed the church on the way in this morning, and Joy says, "Oh look, there's only 4 cars there." And then it dawned on us it's not Sunday.
Yeah, it's very good.
Those who can, please rise, because we cannot sing. He lives sitting down.
That's right.
Number 241, and we'll do all 3 stanzas. Yeah.
two of
Can
those
this be
today.
turned up
Because
any?
they always say
Yes.
high soprano.
I'm
Push the knob.
We might.
I know it.
The mic is already on. He's got everything
Huh?
adjusted.
We don't want to blast the tree, swirl out the tree, but I could not hear it standing by it. Yeah, it's on.
It's okay. It's okay out here.
Yeah.
Yes. Get the mic, Shirley, put the mic over there in front of
Yeah,
him.
we're gonna do my country.
Give him
Number
the mic. He's not
226,
anywhere near the mic.
226.
No,
We
he
do
doesn't
3
want to
verses.
sing.
First, second, and fourth. My country 'tis of thee. We probably don't need books today.
Probably don't.
We're gonna sing one more.
We're gonna sing America the Beautiful, the next
Yes,
on the next page.
228, right across the page.
Let's do the first and last.
First and last.
First and last, okay. birthday in a month.
Oh my goodness.
All right, so here we go. And old Bill.
Who's had a birthday?
Bill had.
Oh, yeah.
And
I had
Andy.
one the 5th,
All right.
Okay.
20th.
20th.
Andy,
Yeah.
when was your birthday?
I'm I'm later on.
Oh, okay. All right.
We got to. Oh, here we go.
Let's have a big hand for Andy.
Oh, absolutely. Yay.
It's so pretty little stretch to get all this out here.
Everybody can see. I can sit on the chair.
We enjoyed it.
Andy, are you sitting here?
No, it's It's absolutely wonderful to have music again here at the Asbury class.
Ian does good.
I'm gonna sit down. I hope
Okay.
there's no more getting up because I can't
This
sit
is
up.
just
We have kids.
It is, isn't it?
I think I'm in a hole.
all right. This is memory. Be in memory of Memorial Day, which is Monday. So here is the blessing. Can you hear, Patty?
Yeah.
Okay. From 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 2, I exhort therefore that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving to thanks be made for all men, for kings and for all in authority over you, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in the godliness and honestly. Have you ever thought about the difference between forgetting and remembering? Remembering is a conscious choice. It involves an effort on my part, especially at my age, to pull from my memory bank thoughts and feelings previously deposited there. Forgetting, well, that just happens. I failed to send that birthday card to my friend. I let the appointment with the dentist go by. Oops, it happens more frequently than I'd like. How do I keep from forgetting? I make that conscious effort to remember date books, to-do lists, sticky notes, all help me and prompt me to bring to my mind the things I need to do. Tomorrow is Memorial Day here in the United States. It's a conscious effort by our government to help us remember and honor those who fought and died for our country, lest we forget the great price of freedom. As we pause to remember them, let us not forget those who currently serve in our armed forces and those who lead our country. Please take a few moments to pray for the provision of their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. Pray for their protection and ask God to bless their loved ones here at home. Regardless of where you are Monday, take a moment to pray for those who lead your nation. Ask God to give wisdom and direction to those in authority. Thank Him for the blessings you have around you. Really, we need to go and do this more than just on one special day a year. We need to let every day be a Memorial Day. Are you forgetting to pray? Remember. If we'll all bow our heads. Lord, you have blessed us as a nation with a great freedom and riches. Thank you for the abundance of these gifts. May we never forget your kindness to us, no matter where we live. Thank you. And now Richard will lead us in the lesson.
What's those chords up there?
Thank you.
The applause is deafening.
Now I know what a smattering is. I want y'all to know that I have this because in January I had a little procedure on my retina done and scraped some scar tissue off of it. And when it came time in April for me to get new lenses after my eyes had settled down, guess what?
Yeah.
So I hope to have my eyes fixed in this millennium sometime. But at any rate, we all know what's going on with this, and I learned a new word this year, pandemic. And you know, it's a funny thing. I think God sends these things sometimes, and sometimes the Chinese do, but God's in control, so I ain't worried about it. But the thing about that is that these kinds of events bring out the worst in some and the best in most. And I believe that with all my heart. I've been a sports nut all my life, and I was watching ESPN the other night, and they were talking about how, you know, people are doing good things. Well, it seems that this woman that had played soccer at the University of Florida got her degree in nursing, and she didn't have to report to the hospital in Miami for 45 days. So she gets on an airplane. Guess where she goes? New York City. And she worked under horrible conditions to the point of exhaustion every day, and did it with a smile. And she is not alone by any stretch of the imagination, so it does bring out the best in most of us. And I'm not going to say that everybody's, you know, a good person, but most of us are. Now, our lesson today is entitled Repent of Injustice, and it deals with our old friend Jeremiah. Now, exhaustive research has determined that Jeremiah was neither a bullfrog nor a friend of mine. But he was a big-time prophet, one of the major prophets, and by the Israelites held up in the esteem of Elijah and Moses and, you know, big-time operators. So we're going to see what we can find out from Jeremiah. The scripture lesson, I'm going to read half of it, but that'll get us to where we're going. Let me use my finger here.
Not yet.
Not yet. There are 4 of them.
He's off key.
One more.
One more.
I think he's
Oh, maybe it's 3.
Well, maybe he wore himself out. Okay.
He knew we were here.
You know, God was sending prophets down.
Speak into the microphone. Nobody can hear you.
God was sending prophets to the people he wanted to talk to and tell them what he wanted them to know. The prophets would, and then the prophets would say to the recipients of God's word, "Thus saith the Lord." Okay. Thus saith the Lord, go down to the house of the king of Judah and speak there this word and say, hear the word of the Lord, O king of Judah, that sittest upon the throne of David, thou and thy servants and thy people that enter in by these gates. Thus saith the Lord, execute ye judgment and righteousness, and deliver the spoiled out of the hand of the oppressors, and do no wrong. Do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless, nor the widow. Neither shed innocent blood in this place. For if you do this thing indeed, then there shall enter by the gates of this house kings sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, he and his servants and his people. But if you will not hear these words, I swear by myself, saith the Lord, that this house shall become a desolation. And we have discovered that the Lord don't kid around. And we sometimes, and I worry about this with our children, we talk to them, you know, like being a Christian is Easter when we forget Good Friday. And we need to all understand that the Lord's in charge and the Lord's going to have his way, whether we like it or not. So it behooves us to listen to the Lord and do what he says. Now, the trick is making sure who you're listening to is telling you what the Lord said. Because the world is full of deceitful people and people that will use scripture and other things to their own ends. And it's easy to be deceived because Satan doesn't always wear two horns and a tail. Sometimes he looks pretty good, or she looks pretty good. In 1980, I think most of us are old enough to remember that, Mount St. Helens erupted, and that was a big blast. It is said to have had more power than 1,600 atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima. And I've been out there in the last 10, 15 years to Montana and Idaho in that area. And you can still see where, there's a lot of desolation. But where the ashes fell, they're now forest gone. So, the Lord does what he wants to and gets our attention. And sometimes it's like the old story about the mule. You get a 2x4 upside his head, and that's the way you get a mule's attention. We all know that. But that devastation at Mount St. Helens was a natural disaster. What's coming to Jerusalem is a supernatural disaster. That's going to be caused by men and women. But Jerusalem is going to be ransacked, razed, and then a long time later rebuilt. In the meantime, the local residents they're going to Babylon. God called Jeremiah as a young man to be a prophet. And he was generally pretty well thought of. He was known by some of these writers that do these studies that I think don't have another job, don't have enough to do, and they come up with more blather than we need. So they called him the weeping prophet. I don't think anybody called him the weeping prophet when he was alive. But he was the son of Hilkiah, who was a Jewish priest. I think his family was fairly well off because they, after he got called by God, they sent him to be educated by the Shaphan family, which was right up there. I guess the smartest guy in the world back then was a guy named Gamaliel, who Paul or Saul sat at the feet of. And the Shaphan family was right up there with Gamaliel. But he was called in 626 BC to prophesy regarding Jerusalem's destruction. The reason for that was the Israelites had fallen away from God. They weren't doing what they agreed to do in the covenant. They were worshiping Baal and offering their children in a fire to Molech, one of Baal's henchmen, I guess. But God said, you tell those people that they're going to see famine, they're going to be plundered and taken captive by foreigners. This happened, he started this 5 years before it happened. Now, at the time Joachim was the king. And he had actually heard Jeremiah's pleadings and reformed a little bit. He got the people turned around. But his grandfather, Manasseh, was so bad that he couldn't undo everything that was done. And, you know, they had a hard time. Jeremiah resisted God's call. He said, I'm too young. I don't speak well. We ever heard that before? What did Moses say at the burning bush? I sometimes wonder if Noah wasn't the third captain of the ark that God called. You never know, but, you know, people are people, and just like me and a lot of other folks say, I'm not qualified for them. Well, you don't know till you try. And if your heart's with it, God will take you where He wants you to go. Believe me. While Jeremiah was moaning and groaning, God touched his mouth. And he fell into this big state of disrepair. Then all of a sudden, he became obsessed with preaching God's word. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. He was going on and on and on like a Baptist preacher. When he was doing all this, there was another priest named Pashur, P-A-S-H-U-R, who had Jeremiah beaten and put in stocks in Jerusalem for a day. You just keeping on. Zedekiah, who was the king, I think we heard about him last week or week before. Anyway, he had Jeremiah put in a cistern. He was knee-deep in mud. And I remember to this day, I was sitting watching a television movie about that with my old college roommate. And I looked at him and I said, don't worry, somebody's going to pull him out tomorrow. And sure enough, this eunuch, who was a Cushite, came there, put some clothes under his arms, wrapped a rope around him, and they pulled him up out of the cistern. And my buddy said, well, how'd you know about that? And I said, I read the book. But, you know, we have to do whatever it takes to get people's attention to save them. If you had a cure for cancer, wouldn't you be ashamed of yourself if you didn't let everybody know about it and share it with them? Well, that's what we're doing. You know, death and destruction, living in hell is a whole lot worse than cancer, I imagine. I don't know, I can't say that, but it sure seems like it. And I think what we really need to do is to get these people on their horse and tell them, ride that horse and get yourself into heaven, because that's where the good times are going to be. I went down to New Orleans last year with my granddaughter. She was supposed to go to a music festival. We got there and they wouldn't let her in. She was 17. So we just walked around, had a good time, and I got a T-shirt down there that said "Le Bon Temps Roulé," and on the back of it said "Let the good times roll." And that's what we're striving to do, is find what we call the good times. Now, the good times ain't exactly what the people in New Orleans might call them, but they are to us. They're being with friends, they're being with family, they're being with each other, just like we are today. And I sincerely applaud you folks for doing this, for getting together when it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but as it turns out, it ain't that hard, is it?
No.
I'm in the heritage class. I don't know if you get all those ladies moving in the same direction at the same time. Don't tell them I said that.
You're on record.
I say that every week. I tell Sue Terrell that I'm going to bring a tambourine up here next time and start shaking that thing so we can move the beat up into songs a little bit, because Mary Alice sings a little too slow for me. But that's, make a joyful noise. That's all that matters. We had a friend over when I was at HAB. She was later a member of the Friends, emotionally challenged. And later she talked like that. Well, she got mugged, and they put her on some kind of dope to get her, back. And she could talk better than me. But she used to sit next to my two boys in church, and when they started singing, that woman made a joyful noise, I guarantee you, but nobody could understand her. And I guess she sat with my two boys because they couldn't carry a tune of bucket. They were singing in this choir in Atlanta when the choir master was a world-known, renowned choir lady. And she told my sons that when we go into big church, you just move your mouth, don't make any noise. Well, my wife was a choir mother, and she told me about that. And I said, son, you make a joyful noise, and don't let her stop you. Because, it's good to have a good choir, and golly, we have a great choir where we are at the Methodist Church, but they had a pretty good choir in Atlanta, but just a bunch of pros, and you got too many hired guns out there singing. I don't think the Lord's impressed with that. The Lord's message to this group that Jeremiah was talking to was, if you folks want to keep a job, all you nabobs and satraps and stable hands and everybody else working for, in King David's house or his lineage, do what I'm telling you, or you're going to pay the consequences. And some of them did, Some of them were slaughtered and killed, and the rest of them were hauled off to Babylon, and they stayed there for, 70 years? Before they came back. And I've always heard that as bad as hell is, it's about the same thing as being on earth and not being around God, or not having God around you. And somebody told the exile people in Babylon, said, sing us a song. They said, ain't singing these songs the whole way in this foreign land. And they couldn't. But God said, enough's enough. He got into Xerxes' mind and brain, and then he got into Darius's brain and sent Nehemiah back to fix the wall and redo the city. And they apparently learned the lesson for about a generation. And then it goes back again. But I think we should look at this pandemic the same way. We've got a chance to start over again. Not that all of us need to start over. Probably I'm preaching to the choir here, but we need to start over in terms of our energy expended on those that need the word. And I don't think anybody here expends as much energy as they could in getting the word to those less fortunate than us. I know I don't. I've gone off on a tangent every once in a while. When I retired, I had been making a pretty good living manipulating people to their advantage and making them money. So I said, well, I'm going to put my brain in neutral and go off and do some menial tasks. So I started volunteering at Habitats, and I went down there every Wednesday, or 40 Wednesdays a year, for 18 years. There was a group of 6 of us at the Baptist Church that retired at the same time that had us like minds, and we started going to Europe for 2 weeks every summer. And we would rehab old buildings and make either churches or community centers out of it. And I said the best thing I did in Europe was I made a lot of sawdust. But we had a good time doing that. And I remember standing out there on the street in Erla, Germany, and these people came by and wanted to know what we were doing. And we told them, well, nobody in Europe does that kind of thing. They don't have volunteer work over there. They all go on vacation in August. But volunteerism is maybe 1% where we're 90% here. And that knocked them out. So I'm not what you'd call an evangelist, but I was evangelizing those folks because I was telling them I was willing to spend $3,000 of my own money to come over there and clean their streets and build them a house and do this, that, and the other. Because Jesus loved them. So there's all kinds of ways to do that. You don't have to be a silver-tongued devil, and the Lord knows I'm not. But you can lead by your actions, and you can let others know the reason you're doing that is because you believe in Jesus Christ and you know that Jesus Christ loves them. This is a good opportunity for us to find new ways to do what we're supposed to be doing. I'm not saying anybody here not doing what they ought to be doing, but you know there's something else you could be doing. Go and sin no more.
And love one another.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, as I was sitting there listening to Richard's sermon and lesson, I think Jeremiah the bullfrog was in attendance because I could sure hear him talking. I think even Patty could hear him talk.
I sounded that bad, huh?
Yeah, he was there. All right. So, I was in McDonald's drive-through this morning, and the lady behind me honked at me and flipped me off because I was taking too long to order. Take the high road, I thought to myself, so I paid for her food. As I moved up, she leaned out the window looking all crazy at me because the cashier told her I paid for her food. She felt embarrassed. When I got to the second window to get my food, I showed them both receipts that for her food and my food. I paid for it and it was mine. So I took it, and now she has to wait even longer. You don't mess with old folks. If we'll all stand or sit if we can't stand, we'll be dismissed. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen.
I'm looking at, you have been digging that big food out.
When does the hot tub go in?
You're out.
Digging out this big